Ice does not ask permission before it kills. It doesn't care who you were born to be, what name you carry, or which man promised to marry you that morning. It simply takes. And on the night a duke found a bride abandoned in a snowdrift outside a crumbling chapel, ice had almost finished its work. What he did next would humiliate his worst enemy, scandalize an entire nation of high society, and somehow, against every calculation either of them made, become the truest love story neither of them believed they deserved. The wind that night sounded less like weather and more like a warning. Rowan Ashcombe, Duke of Rothmere, rode through it because duty demanded it. A tenant's roof had collapsed under the ice, and a man who owned that much land owed something back to the people who worked it. He was not a sentimental man. He preferred problems with clean solutions: timber, nails, coin. People were harder to fix, so mostly he avoided them. His shortcut home cut past the ruins of an old chapel, long abandoned by the parish and occasionally borrowed by families who wanted a dramatic backdrop for a wedding. Tonight it was nothing but broken stone and howling wind, until his horse spooked at something pale fluttering near the gate. He almost rode on. Almost. Then he saw the lace. He dismounted and found her curled against the frozen iron bars, a woman wrapped in a gown clearly built for candlelight, not blizzards. Her skin had gone the color of skimmed milk. Her lips were edging toward blue. When he turned her face toward him, recognition hit like a fist. Eleanor Vance. Daughter of a drowning-in-debt earl. As of that very afternoon, the bride of Julian Ashford. Ashford. Just the name curdled in Rowan's mouth. Ashford was the man who had swindled Rowan's younger brother out of everything he owned in a rigged investment scheme, a betrayal so total that his brother, facing debtor's prison, had chosen a pistol over disgrace. For 4 years, Rowan had been quietly dismantling Ashford's finances piece by piece, buying his debts, choking off his credit, waiting for the moment the man had nothing left to stand on. This marriage to Eleanor was supposed to be Ashford's lifeline, her family's old title, a hidden reserve of land, everything he needed to rebuild. Instead, here she was. Discarded. Freezing. Alone. The carriage tracks in the snow told the rest. Deep, frantic grooves, cut by wheels leaving in a hurry. Ashford had bolted and left his bride to die in the cold rather than face whatever news had spooked him. Rowan looked down at her rigid, half-frozen face and made a decision that had nothing to do with strategy. He tore off his coat, wrapped her in it, and rode for home with her body slack and freezing against his chest. Rothmere Hall swallowed them whole, a house built of dark stone and heavier silence. His housekeeper took one look at the bundle in his arms and didn't ask a single question, just started shouting for hot bricks, warm water, and the doctor. For 2 days, Eleanor drifted through fever. Rowan told himself he stayed by her bedside because she was valuable, his key to finally burying Ashford for good. But the excuse wore thin fast. In her delirium, she didn't cry out for lost love. She muttered about debts. About creditors. About her father's house being seized. She wasn't grieving a broken heart. She was grieving a broken contract, the desperate arithmetic of a woman who'd been traded like currency her whole life. When the fever finally broke on the 3rd morning, she opened sharp gray eyes, looked around the unfamiliar room, and settled on him without flinching. "You're the Duke of Rothmere," she rasped. "I am." She asked how long she'd been there. 3 days, he told her. She closed her eyes, and something in her face cracked, not from cold this time. 3 days missing was enough to end a woman in their world. A bride missing 3 days was already tomorrow's headline. "He left me," she said flatly. No tears. Just a woman reciting a fact. A letter had arrived just before the ceremony, she explained. Ashford read it, went pale, and fled, taking her coat by mistake and leaving her standing in the wind. Rowan told her what the letter likely said. His agents had finally closed the trap, Ashford's shipping investments had collapsed days earlier. Broke and desperate, he'd run rather than face a bride he could no longer afford to marry. Eleanor absorbed this with a speed that startled him. "You ruined him," she said. "I did. And in doing it, you ruined me too." She wasn't wrong, and they both knew it. A jilted, half-frozen bride returning home in disgrace would be picked apart by London's gossips within the week. Staying in a bachelor duke's house for days on end was somehow worse. There was no version of this where her reputation survived intact. "I don't collect trophies, Miss Vance," Rowan said quietly. "I deal in solutions." By the fourth day, with the storm cleared and sunlight pouring cold and bright through the windows, Rowan laid a stack of papers on the table between them and said the words that would rewrite both their lives. "Marry me." She laughed, short, disbelieving. He was serious. If she went home, she was ruined and penniless. If she married him, she became a duchess, her father's debts vanished overnight, her sister's future was secured, and Ashford would spend the rest of his life known as the fool who threw away a duchess to chase a fortune he never got. "You'd marry a woman to spite a man," she said. "I'd marry a woman who survived a blizzard and woke up calculating her family's finances instead of weeping over a broken engagement," he answered. "I don't need a wife who loves me. I need one who won't flinch." She thought of Ashford's warm carriage disappearing down the road while she froze by the gate. She thought of her father pacing his study, waiting for men to come and take everything. He wasn't offering romance. He was offering armor. She picked up the pen and signed. The wedding, days later, was brisk and businesslike, vows spoken in a bishop's office with the clipped efficiency of a contract closing. No kiss. Just a nod, a signature, and an arm offered to escort his new duchess into a life neither of them had chosen out of affection. Their townhouse in Mayfair ran like a machine, efficient, cold, beautiful. On the night before their first public appearance together, Rowan came to her dressing room carrying a black velvet box. Inside sat a heavy, old-fashioned diamond collar, more shackle than jewelry. "Society respects weight," he told her. "They want to see you broken tonight. Don't give it to them." He fastened it around her throat himself, his knuckles brushing the back of her neck. She felt the cold bite of the stones and the warmth of his hands at the same time, and something unfamiliar sparked low in her chest. Not fear. Something closer to waking up. That night, walking down the staircase of a packed ballroom on the arm of the Duke of Rothmere, Eleanor didn't lower her eyes once. When a vicious society matron tried to needle her about, recovering so quickly from the harsh weather, Eleanor answered with such icy, surgical wit that the woman had no response at all. Rowan swept her onto the dance floor before the silence could turn awkward, and for the first time, she felt something other than survival. She felt triumph. Weeks passed. The gossip that had threatened to destroy them curdled instead into admiration, the untouchable Duke and his razor-tongued Duchess, a partnership nobody could crack. It was exactly the image they'd planned to build. It was also slowly killing them both. Living behind a locked door of performed affection, a hand at the waist here, a glance there, all for public consumption, turned unbearable once the doors closed at night and the silence between their separate bedrooms became its own kind of torment. The break came at a crowded garden exhibition, humid glass rooms thick with orchids and gossip. Eleanor had wandered off alone when a voice she'd hoped never to hear again spoke behind her. "You always did look stunning in white." Ashford. Still polished, still arrogant, utterly unbothered by what he'd done. He mocked her survival, insisted she was nothing but a pawn in Rowan's feud, warned her that the Duke would discard her the moment he tired of the game. Rowan appeared from behind a wall of ferns before she could answer, calm in a way that was far more frightening than rage. He told Ashford exactly what would happen if he ever spoke to her again, not bankruptcy this time, but total, permanent ruin. Ashford fled, and the moment he was gone, the adrenaline hit Eleanor all at once. Her knees buckled. Rowan caught her, pulled her hard against his chest, and asked, voice cracking, if she was hurt. "He just talked," she breathed. "I should have broken his neck in the snow that day," Rowan said. She said his name, just his name, and something in him gave way completely. He kissed her like a man who'd been drowning and just found air. She kissed him back with everything she'd been burying under months of careful composure. In the carriage home, he tried to apologize, retreating into duty and contracts and broken agreements. She wasn't having it. She slid off her seat, knelt in front of him, and told him plainly. When Ashford spoke, she felt the cold return. When Rowan touched her, it disappeared. She didn't want an apology. She wanted him, all of him, the fury and the loyalty and the heat. None of it had let her forget. That night, the door between their rooms stayed open. There was no strategy left in it, no performance. Just two people who'd built a fortress to survive the world and finally let each other inside it. Ashford, meanwhile, was unraveling. Broke, desperate, and cornered by debts owed to men who didn't send polite letters, he decided Eleanor was still the soft, obedient girl he remembered, someone he could frighten into helping him one last time. He cornered her at a dress shop on a Tuesday afternoon while Rowan sat trapped in Parliament. He produced a bundle of forged letters, threatening to publish a fake affair that would paint Eleanor as a conspirator who'd orchestrated her own abandonment to run off with a wealthy duke. £30,000, he told her, or he'd burn her new life to ash. The old Eleanor, the one freezing in the snow, waiting to be told what her life was worth, might have panicked. This one snatched the letters straight out of his hand, dropped them on the floor, and ground her heel into them. "Print them," she said, "ice in every word. Tell them whatever you want. Do you really think I'm afraid of whispers, after what this city already watched happen to me and did nothing?" Ashford was still stammering when the shop door slammed open and Rowan strode in, still in his parliamentary coat, having clearly run the entire way. The temperature in the room seemed to drop as he crossed toward Ashford, murder written plainly across his face. He raised his hand. And Eleanor stopped him with one word. His name. "He's already dead," she said quietly. "The men he owes will find him by Friday. He isn't worth your hands. He isn't worth our time." Something in Rowan let go. For years of hatred, and it evaporated in an instant, replaced by something far more valuable, clarity. He told Ashford to be out of London by nightfall or he'd personally see to it the man's creditors kept him alive just long enough to suffer for it. Ashford ran and never returned to society again. He vanished onto a ship bound across the ocean, becoming nothing but a cautionary tale whispered in gentlemen's clubs. 2 weeks later, their carriage rolled up the long drive of Rothmere Hall in Yorkshire, the brutal winter finally breaking into the first soft green of spring. Eleanor stepped down onto the gravel and breathed air that smelled like earth and possibility instead of soot and scandal. Before joining Rowan in his study, she climbed the stairs alone to the room where she'd first woken from her fever, the room where a stranger had sat by her bedside instead of walking away. She stood in the doorway a long moment, remembering the girl who'd believed her life was already over. That girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who had been left to freeze and chosen, instead, to burn, and to pull the man who found her into the fire right along with her. She closed the door on the past and walked toward her husband, and toward whatever came next, on her own terms. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't destroying the person who hurt you. It's building a life so full, so unbreakable, that they become irrelevant to it entirely. If this story pulled you in, tell me in the comments which moment hit you hardest. Give it a like if you want more stories like this one, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.